Hello again. I am Linda McGuire, neuroscientist, gerontologist, and professional musician. So glad to be with you again today. Today we're going to talk about Alzheimer's and dementia caregivers. Caregivers are often neglected in the field of health science and research, but they're becoming more and more important to look at because the dementia patients have a whole list of problems, and the caregivers who watch and manage these patients, usually 24/7, it's a very, very demanding job, and the caregivers eventually pair with some of the issues themselves. Many caregivers have told me it feels contagious working with an Alzheimer's patient or dementia patient. Why is that? Well, as human beings, we're very empathetic. So if someone has a problem, we want to pair with what they're experiencing and feel it ourselves so we can better understand how to approach and mitigate the problem, or to deal with the problem, or to solve the problem if we can. Unfortunately, Alzheimer's and dementia is a disease of a progressive brain decline. So as their memories slip away, their abilities to control their behaviors, fall away. Caregivers are the empathy, they try to empathize with it, and they become as confused as the Alzheimer's patients sometimes. There are very few drugs to treat Alzheimer's and dementia patients. There hasn't been a new Alzheimer's drug released in about 10 years now. They're working on some others, but the bottom line is there are a few things that can help and manage Alzheimer's patients. One of those things, most decisively, is the use of music to resurrect these memory networks, these deeply embedded sensory networks that are associated with patriotism and songs from childhood and experiences from your youth and songs, the voice of Elvis Presley, etc. So the use of music to resurrect those networks in patients help caregivers manage those patients when nothing else really can. So I'm right now in a doctoral program at George Mason University in health communications, and I'm looking very carefully at issues that caregivers have with patients, feelings that they feel, experiences that they find important. In fact, I did a study in the spring of 2016 with two other colleagues, supervised by my investigator and advisor, Gary Krebs, who's very interested and supportive of my work. And he's an awesome guy. He's at George Mason and one of the most personable people and committed people to health and health science and health communication as it gets. So great guy, and I'm very lucky to be there. So we did a study on caring for caregivers, and we went through a web community, a Facebook community, and looked at what was important to caregivers and what had a lot of likes and what had a lot of comments and what got attention and how caregivers talk to each other to deal with that. And we found some very, very interesting findings, mainly that it was the dilemmas that they surrounded each other with. And when there was a death in the community, it was celebrated, as it were, with religious content, lots of prayers, the whole spiritual aspects that caregivers resort to deal with what is going on in their lives. What was not celebrated were things like birthdays or family events that would normally be celebrated, holidays, etc. Because why? Because a change in routine means chaos for a dementia patient. We find that often. So understanding the needs of caregivers, what is important to them, how to celebrate the 4th of July without having a big party, but you can celebrate it through music and put meaning into the patient without putting them over the edge. And that makes it easier for the caregiver, helps the caregiver celebrate the holiday, helps the patient remember the holiday and come into a sense of normalcy, a sense of old self through nostalgia, that embedded sense of patriotism. We all have that. Childhood memories and the energy that's associated with those memories. So my job as a programmer, I design music interventions, is to understand you as a caregiver, understand the patient as in their level of disease and what they're capable of, and what their voice type is if they're going to sing, and how much to energize, how many verses to give, how high to raise the tune, how low to maintain it. So I have a questionnaire that's going out right now that's just been approved by the Internal Review Board at George Mason for caregivers. And if you want to get a copy of this questionnaire, email me at lmaguire3@gmu.edu. That's LMAGUIR3@gmu.edu. I'll send you a link to the questionnaire. You fill out this questionnaire, and I return a prescription iPod to you. And then we'll send you a follow-up questionnaire to see how it worked. Now, what's in this questionnaire? Of course, we need your email to correspond with you on this, but the first thing we ask are, what are your 5 preferred types of music? I have one here, and we go into pop and jazz and country and spiritual and rock and classical and R&B and hip-hop and ballad. Some people like the stories. Now this is your preference. We ask the preference for your patient later, and then we cross-analyze those to give you a playlist that works for you both, or that works during the most difficult times of day. We ask about your schedule, your patient's schedule, when the problems arise. For instance, one of these, this one has forgetfulness most of the day, but not in the evening. This one has a 5 to 7 and a 7 to 9 problem. This is that sundowning period. This is also in another one of these. I noticed it was just across the board. The most serious problems right here happened between 5 and 7 to 9 p.m. So you need to focus the prescription iPod on the patient at that point. This is a 5-foot-tall patient at 100 pounds, late-stage Alzheimer's, who's an introvert. So there's a music program that deals with that. The patient's almost 90 years old. And so the music that is preferred here is pop, holiday music, oldies, and dance music. Well, I think if there is agitation, you want to stay away from the dance preferences at that point. Maybe get them activated a little earlier in the day. So I use this information to design a prescription iPod that looks at the caregiver's needs to manage the patient. And when the patient is having a little easier day of it, like in the morning, all there is forgetfulness. So one of the better prescription programs for the morning for this particular case and questionnaire would be to have the nostalgic songs, maybe ones that are involved with dance, maybe one that the caregiver can get the patient up and do some movement with, especially when there's a little bit of wandering around 11 a.m. To get the patient dancing or moving together with a familiar song keeps them from wandering. So this is where and then that's how the prescription iPods work. And there don't seem to be problems between 9 p.m. and the morning again. So that's a pretty simple, direct application. Now, I also ask, how long do you listen to music? For the caregiver listens 3 to 6 hours a day, but the patient only listens 1 to 3 hours a day. Now, I would definitely try to bump that up for the patient. This is very unusual. I also noticed that the more hours you listen to music, the more you understand how it affects your mood or your feelings. And so there's a category for feelings: relaxed, exhilarated, exhausted, peaceful, energized, thoughtful, focused. So I analyze your questionnaire and I help you with a prescription iPod. And I hope I asked just enough questions to get what I need to give you what you need. This is a West Coast patient, and the questionnaire is not completely filled out. So the more information that you give me on this questionnaire, the better I can help design your prescription iPod. And then I ask some personality traits of you as a caregiver. This caregiver is very creative and has a lot of mid-range, moderate skills. Says they're very not very careless or intellectual. So that, so to deal with these excellent information, actually means she does consider herself intellectual. That's good. So if she's intellectual, then she can deal with some classical music, which would help her to have more feelings, I believe. So eventually to integrate a little bit of classic pop rather than just pop. So it's all good. I'm the doctor. I'm the prescription medical musician here that's going to help shift out your quality of life as a caregiver. There are also some wonderful quotes in a couple of these that I wanted to share with you that are very moving. And this kind of sums it up for a lot of caregivers. Here's one. My husband, despite 9 years of vascular dementia, still remembers words and the tunes to hundreds of songs. When he's having a bad day, he sits down with one of his 5 guitars and strikes up a tune. He still sings a song now and then that I don't remember hearing anywhere else. He tells me his grandmother taught it to him when he was a small child. Music connects him to a family and a past that otherwise would be long forgotten. He may get up when he's finished and say he has to go home because his wife is waiting, but that's okay. He has a momentary visit with precious memories from his past, and he is at ease for a little while. So we've talked in past programs how music taps into physiological sensory networks that relax us or activate us, depending on the rhythm. It's a big part of it, depending on the guitar versus the bongo drums versus a trumpet versus a piano versus a violin. So different instruments can create different levels of physiological awareness and activation. And that's what plays with the physical body that talks to the brain networks. So that was a wonderful story, I think. And so these old songs, hundreds of songs. He's got severe vascular dementia for 9 years, but still remembers hundreds of songs. I mean, that's a lot of songs. And yet they have difficulty speaking. So looking at this information and developing a prescription iPod in light of this, now this caregiver loves country music and spiritual music. And there's spiritual country out there that she may not have heard. Next, she likes traditional music. So logically, she might go into like the country ballads because that's kind of a traditional fare. And people play games with the traditional songs like Moon River and such. When those are woven into new arrangements, that's something that might give her some joy and alertness. And the Alzheimer's patient might tap into that too, or the vascular dementia patient. She likes rock and holiday. Holidays have all sorts of memory in them as well. So music is very important to this caregiver. She listens 1 to 3 hours a day, and her patient listens 3 to 6 hours a day. So she obviously seems to manage the patient with music, or he self-manages from the sounds of it. If he picks up his guitar, plays these songs. So they listen to music in the early morning and midday. So let's look at the problems during those times of days and see if that early morning, midday, not too many problems. The problems pick up in the afternoon with irritability, panic, moodiness, and paranoia. So, how do we write a program for that on the information that we just received from her? And also there are issues at bath time, confusion at bath time, meal time, dress time, and issues at sleep time. So there's a relaxation program in the afternoon to deal with the mood and paranoia. It's got to be pretty one personality. So this is what I'm helping with here. And to escort the patient for sleep. That's a good one too. Looks like there's some sundowning issues here. So my email address, if you want one of these, I analyze and create a prescription iPod for you. And there's just lots to learn from these. This caregiver is organized and practical and sympathetic. There's music that matches those qualities, can validate who she is. She's kind, intellectual, imaginative. Sounds like a little Mozart's at hand here. Creative and efficient and energetic. So sometimes she has the right to relax too. How to get her and her patient to relax together. She's from the deep South too. So we're not going to activate her too much. Not like those, we have to activate those Northerners. It's cold up in the north. They know what activation is. Down the deep South, it's a different type of activation, isn't it now? So we're looking at ages of the caregiver, who's a younger introvert. She's under 60 and she's an introvert. And the older patient is almost 75 and a male. So there are considerations there as far as the prescriptive iPod, and that's what I do. So I'm going to take these early morning and midday and say, what you're doing sounds good there. If you're already listening to music, I'd like to know what it is. I'm going to give you 2 or 3 programs for the afternoon and to help your patient get to sleep. So yeah, so they're all a little different. So please email me, lmaguire3@gmu.edu, lmaguir3@gmu.edu, and I'll send you a link to this questionnaire so I can help you as well. Here's another patient that likes country and classical as well, then jazz, traditional and oldies. So here we have a whole different repertoire, some similarities with the country and the classical, yeah? And, but you add some jazz to that and you've got a whole different ball game, whole different genres of music that you can introduce to at least to initiate a prescription iPod. Music is extremely important to this caregiver. She listens 3 to 6 hours a day, and the patient listens up to 10 hours a day. So there's a lot of music in that household. So, and most of the day, and any aspects as to how, she's pretty in tune with how music makes her feel and how it helps the patient feel. Another thing I look at is when the patient listens to music, what parts of the body move. And that tells me what parts of the brain are tapping into the musical effect, so I can tap into those areas and then move to areas that maybe aren't as activated. So head and face, shoulders, arms, fingers, and legs. That's almost everything, but it varies between the patients. Some patients don't move their arms or fingers, they just sit and tap, or some just sit and move their shoulders, huh? Right? So that tells me what's working in the brain that I can start with. And if I can get them doing this, and I add some snare drum, I'll bet they can do this and get them doing this, right? So you can reactivate brain areas that may not be working. And so very interesting. I'd like to look at what's going on during the day for this patient. Looks like the issues are again in the sundowning syndrome from 5 to 7 and 7 to 9, where you get agitation and confusion and wandering, irritability. The forgetfulness is in the morning with this patient. So in the evening, it's a good time to start playing those familiar songs. They're forgetful in the morning, and the issues start around 5 to 7, you can redirect those issues with a little patriotic program or songs that they are familiar with from their music preference categories. So, and then there's cooperation for the most part leading up to bedtime. So there's not really bedtime issues here. So it's all good. Look at the age of the patient. That tells me what length I can program for. And we're looking at a Tidewater East Coast area, which is where I grew up. And some of their favorite songs, You Raise Me Up. I sang that in an earlier program here, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, Whiskey Girl, Live Like You Were Dying. So let me read you some comments from this one. Music is so important to my patient. I personally listen to music all the time except when I'm working. I cannot work or craft without music. I don't get anything done. So music obviously settles this caregiver so that they can actually function. And so that to me tells that it's the music that it maintains the heart rate, accompanies a heart rate, accompanies a physiological relaxation, so and redirects cognitive worry and anxiety so that you can just move your arms and legs. I use music to soothe my mom, who has Alzheimer's. When she gets agitated or bored, I play various CDs or music on Pandora. It's the only thing I have found that calms her down and makes her smile or laugh. So rather than just get various music or CDs, in fact, her list is not too specific or just relying on Pandora to have pretty targeted, consecutive, consistent offerings that are varied, but redirect the patient into an ideal functionality. So that is, this is a questionnaire that I think that you can, as if you are a caregiver or you know someone who is a caregiver, can share with them, work with them to manage their patient, and that improves their quality of life and the patient's quality of life. So if their patient sits quietly in the evening with no problem, as one of these questionnaires noted, the caregiver has a playlist that can relax them and pull them together so that they can have a good night's sleep, because it's going to be another busy day tomorrow. Again, caregiving is 24/7. And when a patient is suffering in the sundowning syndrome hours, you know, there's a variety of music that can settle the patient, keep them, you know, more able to stay seated. Wonderful song is Chattanooga Choo Choo. They all will stop and sing that. Pardon me, boys, is that the Chattanooga Choo Choo? Track 29. Boy, can you give me a shine? That'll get you marching. So if they're wandering, I can afford, you can ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. You can slow their step. I've got my fare, and they'll know the words, and just a trifle to spare. You leave the Pennsylvania station about 3:45. You can slow them down. Read a magazine, and then we're in Baltimore, as you're guiding them somewhere. So the song will redirect their confusion. And so there are just many ways to approach it, and there are many ways I need to understand how it's working for you as a caregiver, how it's working for caregivers. And so caregivers include patients with dementia, they include patients with autism, they include patients with traumatic brain injury, they include patients who are in pain, patients who are depressed. So this is a questionnaire for caregivers with dementia. I have many questionnaires coming down the road here, others for those other populations. And so music has this very significant scientific power established that will resurrect a deeper sense of self, a healthy sense of self for the patient, and what's important these days are the caregivers, particularly for dementia patients who really have very little recourse to maintaining a quality of life for themselves as they take on a gargantuan task of 24/7 caregiving. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. Again, the questionnaire is available. I'm happy to send it to you, lmaguir3@gmu.edu. Please feel free to participate in this questionnaire, and I'll do my best to get the best prescription iPod to you. The first of many prescription iPods, I hope. So look forward to hearing from you, and thanks for being with me today. God bless.